Robinson at the Blanton Museum of Art to speak with Rosario Granados about the exhibition Spirit and Splendor, El Greco, Velázquez, and the Hispanic Baroque. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure to have you.
This is such a beautiful exhibition, and you sort of travel through. And I'm excited for the theme of Baroque masterpieces. Can you help us comprehend why it's important to have an understanding of Baroque beyond Europe, and how has its visual language evolved across the Spanish-speaking world?
The Baroque is a style that, at least in painting and sculpture, is very much attached to the Counter-Reformation. So it's a moment that the Catholic Church needed to defend itself and react after the Protestant Reformation.
Yeah.
And so it became a very globalized way of talking about religion. And as you can imagine, every geography adapted it to its own terms. So it becomes a very wide style that is characterized by the things that we can see in the paintings here. It's very full of movement, it's very expressive, it's very dramatic, but it is completely different depending on the region that it developed. Interesting, a couple of weeks ago, one of our visitors told me that she enjoyed the exhibition a lot because it was completely different from what German Baroque is, which is very more, or was more familiar with. And I think for us that was one of the reasons we wanted to bring the show to the Blanton, to showcase how different it is, and because it's a fantastic bridge for us connecting our European collection with the art of the Spanish Americas. It allows us to be critical with the term because, it can be so diverse that at the end of the day you don't know exactly what it is.
Yeah.
For this process now of adaptation that it went through. The Baroque, because of this connection with religion and politics, allow us to have conversation about how artists traveled around the world and nurture their artistic practice through that movement. And I think we're really in a corner where you can see how models were used for religious purposes, but also adapted to political views, and how that became a local product in other regions. And I'm just thinking in the Immaculate Conception that we have behind you, it's a model that was used by the Spanish crown to show devotion to a very contested dogma in the Catholic Church, this idea that Mary not only is a virgin, but is a woman that was conceived without original sin, which means that is unique among all other women, which of course you needed that because she's the mother of God. How
Right.
You could have Jesus being in her womb if she was like you and me, you know?
Yeah.
She needed to be special, but it was an idea that was challenged for centuries. I mean, in the 12th century, we have documents, in the 13th century, theologians arguing about this, but then the Spanish crown, Philip II and all the heirs to the Spanish crown adopted that and say, if you're loyal to me, you have to believe in this dogma. And so by having images of this virgin with these many characteristics, the blue mantle, the white dress, all the little elements, the mirror with no reflection, the lilies, all this became kind of a banner of political allegiance. And so I think it's very interesting because that's why you have so many of them. We have one here, I'm looking at another one, and you could say, oh, it's kind of a boring thing, but no, it became not only a way of inserting the artistic practice in this very contested religious moment. And when it traveled to different geographies, it was a way of saying, we believe in these certain things and we align politically with the Spanish crown. No? The Pope in 1617 signed a letter saying you cannot talk publicly against this dogma because it's coming against the church. But officially, the dogma was finally recognized until mid-19th century. So it's really a process of 6 centuries.
Wow.
That people were talking about it, but so when it was not official, the Spanish crown adopted it, and so it became a political banner, and I think that's why the Baroque is so fascinating in a way, because I think today we know that art is political, but when we look at these images, we tend to think it's purely religious. And when we decided on the title of the show, we were very mindful also of that. It's called Spirit and Splendor, because, and for, you can say that they're 2 different things, but no, I think in the show it becomes obvious that both ideas can come together, and in a portrait there is a lot of spirit and splendor just as much as an image of the Immaculate Conception that repeats, all over the place, but it's very inserted in this context.
So the example behind you is Mexican painting, and it's different than the one behind me.
Yeah.
And so this one is referenced from an original painting, but it is different.
It is fascinating, this painting here, because it was made by a Mexican painter born in Mexico, but he's copying a painting that was made in Antwerp by Martin de Vos, that was sent to Mexico to be part of the main altarpiece in Mexico City Cathedral.
Okay.
And with this, it's incredible because then we know how the Western tradition arrived in Mexico and how it was affecting the artistic production at the time. And so these paintings arrived probably around 1575 in Mexico. Martin de Vos at the time was kind of the most fashionable painter, so it is not surprising that they wanted some paintings by this very famed and recognized painter. You can think of the main altarpiece of a cathedral as the most important showcase of what beauty and high art was. And so local artists, of course, started to copy those references. And Luis Juarez copied that composition, but made it his own. And you can see in the painting this voluptuous, bright, acid yellow moving all over. And then you see, okay, this is what this Baroque aesthetic is all about. It's about movement, it's about drama, because this guy, the Saint Michael, who in the Bible is kind of the most important defender of the Virgin Mary, He's taking over the demonic being underneath him. And it's all about action. And that Baroque aesthetic was crucial in order to convert people in the New World. So you needed that. This emotional reaction was exactly what was intended, not only in the Americas, but in all over the place. Because if this is a reaction against the Protestant reform, you need emotion to make people feel that this is the right way of revering the divine.
So in this room, you also have some really nice examples that maybe seem closer to the culture of the place in which they were made. So there's this mosaic sort of piece by Correa that is the Marriage of Cana. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about it because the materiality seems really, really important. But then you also have the 2 pieces that are Peruvian, and they seem to be enveloped in the culture in which they were made, but they're obviously also Catholic images.
I think what unites all these images is that they were, again, sharing the same blood flow, if you want. And this is the way in which the Catholic Church needed to assure that people were part of this big family of believers. And that mosaic, I think, is fascinating because it's Mexican, but it's also Asian, and it's also Spanish, and it's even African. And the reason I'm saying all this is because the technique is a local adaptation of the Namban Japanese technique of using mother of pearl to create beautiful images. But in here, that addition of the mother of pearl is being used to recreate biblical scene that is allowing people to learn about the miracles of Jesus Christ, so it's very Western, but it's showing you a very local domestic setting. This is how wealthy families in Mexico City would have had the display of dishes. The table cover that you have on the bottom left looks like one of the things that you may have seen in Mexico City in the 17th century. The Correa family was of African descent. And so you have the world colliding in one single piece. And this is a technique that was used for these small, more emotional and domestic pieces, but the technique was also used to create mosaics of the history of the conquest that, for many reasons, they are now in Spain, but also in Argentina. And so this became a technique that was very much attached to Mexico. And so when the big bureaucrat went back to Spain after serving some years in Mexico, they took these mosaics as kind of souvenirs, something that is called the tornaviaje. And there was a big exhibition at Museo del Prado a couple of years ago that talked about this process of bringing things, unique things from the Americas back to Spain. And the enconchado, like the one we're talking about, became one of those elements that allow for these people working in New Spain to go back and show off the origin of their own wealth, but also to talk about the power of the empire, because they were bringing all these very unique places. And in the case of the Peruvian paintings that we have at the other side of the gallery, it's interesting because these were made maybe 100 years after these paintings. So we're here at the end of the 17th century. This is the end of the 18th century in Peru. But they're very distinctive because they were made by indigenous artists that learn about the Western traditions through prints, but adapted to what they thought that would be easier. These images preserve the didactic purpose of this imagery, of securing the right belief on these sacred characters, but they made them in a way that it felt closer to every location. I think that's something that we can say about Zurbarán or any other painter. Like, people wanted to feel that these religious characters were very close, and that Mary was a mother as you are, that the saint had a body that was being punished, so you could identify with your own physical pain, and then you could have you could develop this devotion to that person. But in the case of Peru, this addition of gold directly to the canvas became kind of a signature. And it has to do with the notions of what gold was for indigenous peoples from, even before the military invasion in the 16th century. And so they're global, similarly to Correa, and then Conchado, but at the same time different. And so going back to what we talked about, the Baroque had this chameleonic nature that it could be many different things. And that's why it's rich to talk about the Baroque, but at the same time it's complicated. And there has been scholarly debate of whether or not we should use it or not. I prefer not to use it in my scholarly work, but it's very attractive. It allows to talk about how these big terms coming from their history really become more popularized. And one of the things that my colleague Holly Boram, who is the Blanton curator of prints, drawings, and European art, and I, when we were managing the show, we decided to slightly edit the label that came to us from the Hispanic Society, and we started explaining what Baroque means, to extend a little bit this conversation that in our history is, as I said, is kind of a heated debate, but to extend it to the general audience, no? And think, is it worth it? Is not? What is the Baroque? And I think for us, more than providing answers, we want just to extend the question and just have people come and see the objects and judge by themselves and see what they think about these gorgeous pieces that we have here.
Oh, so I think what you're talking about lends nicely to my next question, and it's sort of in two parts, but the gist of it basically is one physically moves through the exhibit and there are different colors that sort of align with, I think, different themes. But then the other aspect of it, of my question, has to do with weaving things together to tell a larger story. So you're like the story of empire, the story of religion, the story of people. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, like, specifically maybe just the wall color first.
We received the exhibition as a package. That means that Holly and I, as managers of the show, we did not have a say in the selection of the artwork or in the text. It came to us already established. The sections were already there as well. But when we manage a show, we are tasked with making it our own. And so the best way to do that was to break it in sections that would allow people to make those narrative connections that you mentioned. And color coding, of course, was the best strategy. So we have 3 sections, 3 different colors. We have 5 sections, but we have 3 distinctive colors. One that is more for the origins and the portraits, and so we had the bright red there. Then we have this gorgeous pink that came from one of the paintings. No, it was inspired, or we chose it because it's one of the paintings, and it makes that blue mantle of the Virgin that we were talking about be even brighter. And then the 3rd section is blue and refers to all the things that were made in the Americas. And so in this room where we have both wall colors, it shows this transition of geography, but also allow us to connect the paintings. And so it allows us to put the objects in conversation, which is one of the main tasks of a curator. You want to tell stories, but not only based on your ideas, but what the object is telling you, or what is allowing visitors to make connections object with object, and not having to have your voice as a curator or as a designer. We rely heavily on Matthew Langland, who is the head of exhibition design. He is amazing in helping us bring all these ideas together.
I wanted to make a connection to this sculpture, The Education of the Virgin. It's the only object in the exhibition by a female artist. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about this piece by Luisa Roldán.
Luisa Roldán is having like a big time in the scholarship these days. Like, everybody wants to know, and there's a couple of exhibitions that open in Madrid and in Valladolid, and the National Gallery is organizing one. And it is because she's a female artist. She is but also because she developed this technique of sculpture in terracotta that is very unique, and that allow her to carve a niche for herself that no one else thought about, and allow for a lot of emphasis in female narratives that would connect more with nuns and wealthy female patrons. And so it is significant that we included this. It's one of the 2 only pieces from the Blanton collection that made it to the show. Talking about design, we decided that we wanted to incorporate this one because it's a gorgeous piece, because it kind of added something that was not considered in that design that was provided to us. and it's one of the ways we wanted to make the show ours. But also it's fascinating because the Hispanic Society, the lender of the show, is one of the larger collectors of Luisa Roldan in the US. Oh. And so it was a perfect connection, and to the point is that this piece was treated for conservation by the Hispanic Society conservator. Okay. So it shows that our collaboration, institutional collaboration, is very long, and that we're connected by pieces like this one. But as you said, it was also a significant way of bringing the sculpture, but also women into the conversation. And talking about design, we decided to put it here because we have the Female Saints by Zurbarán next to them, and we have across the gallery, we have a view of La Alameda, which was one of the earliest public spaces for leisure in Seville that showcased two women in the free space with a chaperone, of course, because they were not allowed to go on their own with their face covered to protect their honor. But it allows us then to have a conversation about women's role, both in society, in religious practice, and in artistic creation. And so this is part of the design that we incorporated. But this piece is fascinating because you can really see all these elements of the Baroque that we were talking about. There's a lot of, there's an importance of color, of the texture of the fabric is very intimate, but at the same time is telling you a story of a character that is crucial for the Catholic faith, but in a moment that is not official.
Yeah.
So, and there's a whole debate whether of this image of Mary learning how to read was to encourage people to read themselves, or at the same time saying only Mary can read, you should not try to do it because this is something that should be only for special characters. Yeah. So there's that's debate, or we don't know the intentionality. The fact that it was made by a woman, most likely for the domestic setting, and we know this because of the size of the sculpture. Again, poses more questions than answers.
Yeah.
But it really connects with a sense of spirituality that really wants to connect the viewer with the object that is in front of her.
Find all of our videos and sign up for our newsletter at artthisweek.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter.